in the video, there's going to be some statistics that are given. The Department of Correction website is the source for a lot of those statistics.
Correct.
Okay. And we have the source of the statistics if the panel needs them. Is that correct?
Correct.
At this point in time, I would ask that the video be shown.
Just hold on 1 second.
So yes, nothing to do with the video. Somebody talks, we'll stop the video.
For approximately the last 15 years, the United States has been engaged in the largest imprisonment program ever attempted by a democratic society. The number of persons incarcerated has soared to levels unknown in American history. There are no signs of the prison surges abating. State prison populations are up 59% in just the last 4 years. In state after state, prison capacity is at record highs, but the prison population is even higher. The average American prison system now operates at 15.4% over capacity. Prison violence has also increased. Inmate assaults on correction officers have risen tenfold in the last 5 years. Overcrowding also contributes to inmate assaults on other inmates, as 2 persons with histories of violent assault are placed in a room designed for 1. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, more than 50,000 individuals are housed in the state's correctional institutions. Over the past couple of years, that number increased by over 4,000. The individuals housed in Pennsylvania correction facilities are some of the most dangerous criminals in our society today. They're often mentally disturbed, violent, and have very little to lose. This is especially true of those inmates who are serving extended or life sentences behind bars with little hope for parole. With so many inmates in such close proximity to those charged with their supervision, it is no surprise that inmate assaults on prison staff average 50 per month. This is a common occurrence, but it is for this reason correction officers require a premium health care program. The job of correctional officers is to supervise, care for, and secure the inmates in their prison. This job is made more difficult by constant prison overcrowding and understaffing. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, Pennsylvania prisons operate at 117% of capacity. Large prisons operate at anywhere from 122 to 137% capacity. Overcrowding such as this makes a prison official's job much harder than it has to be. As the number of inmates continues to increase while the number of available cells and beds remains the same, a corrections officer's job becomes increasingly more complicated. Inmate fights and collusion amongst inmates who might plot to harm other groups of inmates or prison staff all increase as the prison population increases. Also, making a correction officer's job much more difficult is the attitude and mentality of the average inmate. Very often, they're bent on little more than creating unsafe situations and turning order into chaos. Many inmates are masters at inflicting damage and pain on others, and are constantly looking for opportunities under which they may gain the upper hand over corrections officers. Inmates attacking prison officials or groups of inmates plotting organized ambushes on unsuspecting corrections officers is not uncommon. Inmates can use brute force to achieve their goals, or they can craft dangerous weapons, often called shanks, from everyday items in their possession. Some common prison weapons are crafted from items like toothbrushes, spoons, and other flatware, broomstick handles, socks with heavy items in them, pens or pencils sharpened to a razor point. With so many weapons at their disposal and an entire culture based on confrontation, it is no wonder that prison officials have some of the most dangerous jobs in America. Suffering attacks and injuries should not be in anyone's job description, and the state should not put their corrections officers into dangerous situations without the proper equipment. The number of state and federal prisoners per 100,000 population tripled in the last 2 decades, and the United States now leads the world in the percentage of its population it keeps behind bars, with an incarceration rate of 343 adults per 100,000 population. Expensive as prisons can be, the incarceration of violent criminals is a tremendous bargain. Violent criminals at large can cause hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage each year. When harder to measure costs, such as the pain and suffering of victims, are considered along with the more quantifiable costs, such as medical care of victims, funerals, and property destruction, it becomes clear that keeping a violent criminal in prison is an extremely efficient use of tax dollars. Of the 5,434 parolees recommitted to prison, 70% were sent back for violations, according to the Pennsylvania Board of Probation and Parole. Due to the increasing concerns about rising crime rates and lax judges, voters started demanding tougher sentences. Prison populations in Pennsylvania and nationwide started creeping up. They never stopped. Pennsylvania's inmate population, now more than 51,000, has grown every year since 1976. Murderers account for 21% of state prison inmates, according to statistics from the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections manages 26 state correctional institutions, 1 motivational boot camp, 14 community correction centers with a staff of only 15,500 employees. As prison crowding worsens, many public officials are embracing alternatives to incarceration, such as electronic home monitoring, boot camps, and intensive supervised probation. Although those alternatives have their place, their benefits have frequently been overstated. The most effective reform would be to return prisons to their primary mission of incapacitating violent criminals, and help the state criminal justice systems get back to their basic duty, protecting innocent people. Pennsylvania state corrections officers face daily challenges in having to keep order and subdue inmates within correctional facilities. While the occupation is demanding and the job of a corrections officer is not for the shy, reserved, or weak, confidence, courage, and the wherewithal to make good decisions and react quickly to any given situation are critical. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports higher incidence of work injuries than any other careers, and inner strength is needed to deal with stress and to separate your personal life and work life. Higher instances of suicide, a rate of 39% above other occupations, occurred in the profession, along with increasing divorce rates.
As far as, if you look at it, you look at the divorce rate as far as the corrections officers, it's really high. I myself went through a divorce it's been about a year now. So, when you think about that, how did the job take a toll? It does take a toll because corrections does change you. You look at things differently. And, everyone else goes to the beach and they're looking at the ocean and they're concentrating on the sound of the waves, and you're looking at the people that are walking up and down the beach and trying to keep track of your kids. When you go to eat in the restaurant, you want to sit towards the door because you want to see who's coming in the restaurant. So it changes you a lot of ways. I think, a better work schedule and a better work shift would definitely make a difference.
Correction officers often conduct focus group sessions, which allow the necessary interaction between officers, their wives, and experts such as Robert P. Del Primo, Ph.D., an associate professor from Buffalo State University's Department of Psychology, who moderates and discusses the many traumatic issues that correctional officers deal with on a daily basis. Honor and integrity are essential to maintain accurate inmate assessments. Infractions of the rules and incidents of misconduct must be reported, and all inmates who are obeying the rules must be treated equally. Vigilance and a watchful eye over prisoners is required at all times to break up fights, prevent escapes, and avoid incidents. Regular searches of inmates, cells, and visitors are performed. A commanding presence and good communication skills are important, since those who work around cell blocks remain unarmed. Inmates spend the most time around corrections officers, so the officer's influence must be strict yet positive. With proper interpersonal skills, officers can contribute to an inmate's rehabilitation. No matter what position you're hired for within the department, you'll receive training at the beginning of your employment and throughout your years of service with the agency. New employees responsible for the care, custody, and control of inmates must complete 4 or 5 weeks of basic training, depending on job classification, at the department's training academy in Elizabethtown, Lancaster County. A strong work ethic is required. Although officers work 5 days a week and typically 8-hour days and weekends, they are oftentimes required to work overtime and holidays. Inmates must be guarded 24 hours, 7 days a week, so dedication and an understanding of the importance of the job is necessary. Physical strength and fitness are important. Good health must be maintained in order to perform at your best every day. The state prison population changes constantly. As some prisoners are released, more are convicted and committed to the Pennsylvania Department Correctional Institution, and new offenders are arrested and enter the system. Nearly 51,000 offenders are housed in Pennsylvania facilities at any given time. Regardless of the setting, corrections officers maintain order within the institution and enforce rules and regulations. To help ensure that inmates are orderly and obey rules, corrections officers monitor the activities and supervise the work assignments of inmates. Oftentimes, officers must search inmates and their living quarters for contraband like weapons or drugs, settle disputes between inmates, and enforce discipline. Officers also report security breaches, disturbances, violations of rules, and any unusual occurrences. Corrections officers cannot show favoritism and must report any inmate who violates the rules. These officers often work in a cell block alone or with another officer among the 50 to 100 inmates who reside there. The officers enforce regulations primarily through their interpersonal communication skills and through the use of progressive sanctions, such as the removal of some privileges. Depending on the offender's security classification, corrections officers may have to restrain inmates in handcuffs and leg irons to safely escort them to and from cells and other areas and to see authorized visitors. Working in a correctional institution can be stressful and hazardous. Pennsylvania corrections officers are oftentimes injured in confrontations with inmates and have one of the highest rates of non-fatal on-the-job injuries. One of the most notable prison riots to ever take place in Pennsylvania's recent history occurred at Camp Hill State Correctional Institution, where over 1,000 violent inmates participated in the prison uprising. Numerous prison officials were taken hostage, and prison inmates set afire many of the facilities within the prison grounds, and were responsible for causing well over $15 million in damaged property during the rampage. After several days, the hostages were freed and order was swiftly restored to the institution. There were no deaths or escapes. Senate hearings concluded the disturbance occurred as a result of overcrowding, understaffing, and the mixing of violent and non-violent inmates.
I ended up with one of the stress-related diseases while I was in there. I still have it to this day. I went out after the riots with hypertension, high blood pressure. As part of the stressors that were inside the jail at the time, that's reversed itself.